Hello and welcome to another Beastiary Cod-Past. It's really been a while. For those of you who are not familiar with the format of these Cod-Pasts, I'm basically going to waffle on about stuff related to the channel and things that you guys have said for, well, a while. So please feel free to alt-tab to something else, maybe play a video game or whatever it is that you're going to do, and maybe sit with a cup of coffee as I am, and relax. I will be putting up visual stuff in the background for you guys to enjoy, so, do generally have fun. Generally, the format of this is that I'm going to be reading your comments, answering some stuff about the videos that I've made recently, and then talking about the future ideas that I have for the channel. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Before I get to any of the main comments, one of the most recent comments that I saw, just today in fact, as I'm recording this, was a comment expressing a bit of disappointment at my creation of the Krampus video. The individual in question was the person who actually asked me to make the Christmas videos, and they were a bit disheartened by the fact that it ended up having a more horror theme, and I will say that I do rather regret that this was the case. I kind of have, I would say, about 70% of the control over the direction that the scripts take, and unfortunately they do tend to write themselves to some extent. The horror theme was just the ultimate conclusion of what I had been saying until that point. But never forget that I do produce these videos for you guys. Whilst I am after the skeleton, that is to say, the idea of making a documentary-style video about fantastical creatures, the meat, the content, the actual topics, is for you guys. So please, if you guys have anything that you would like to see, do tell me, especially if you're feeling disappointed. For what it's worth, I am sorry that it came out negatively for that one individual. However, I do know that many of you did enjoy the video, and I thank all of you who did enjoy the video and who did comment and liked, etc. I will try to make a bit of a balance about this, but it is walking a fine line. As a consequence, next year expect a little bit more cheerful Christmas video, should I get round to finding out how to actually render one. Anyway, first and foremost, we have a comment by I Love Blackpink asking for videos of the Loch Ness Monster and Skinwalkers. And I will say that technically these creatures were addressed in the Werewolf and the Leviathan videos, but not to an extreme extent. I would like to cover them more specifically, but as for now I'm sort of focusing on more general topics. But again, I will get around to them at some point, so please do look forward to that. Up next, there is a comment by Great Sayer Kobe, who is mentioning that they heard from one of Aaron Ra's videos that dragons were apparently based off of monitor lizards and various lizard encounters in Africa. This comment, incidentally, was from the dragon videos, so, go figure. I should have mentioned that before. I thought that it was a particularly interesting comment because this adds to a lot more of the history of the dragon myth. Obviously, dragons have existed all over the world in some form or another, in some myths and another. And I was actually quite surprised at how common it was, something that I do mention in the videos. If any of you guys have additional origins or additional information that you would like to add to any of the videos that I make, please do be sure to plop them down in the comments. I really do appreciate it, and I know for a fact that other people enjoy it too. Next, there is a comment by Heidi K, who says that ghosts are apparently demons or some kind of fallen angel. And that is actually quite an interesting take on the whole ghost mythology and idea. I was under the impression that demons were generally depicted as being more corporeal in nature, but nevertheless, whatever you might think, that is quite interesting. Once more I say, please, if you guys have any interesting ideas, let us know. There is a lot of mention of Bigfoots, mermaids, and aliens, but for the most part, I'm not trying to couch these in religious terms. While I do generally address some kind of religious aspect that they might have, if the creature in fact does have those aspects, I try not to connect them to religion where necessary. Well, when it's unnecessary is what I mean. So, generally you can expect my videos to be not as religious as what one might expect. I should mention that although I do address religions, I am addressing them in a more neutral context. I mention them mostly as coming from a region from the world, rather than as being specifically predominant or what have you. I'm not really sure how to put it. Basically, I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot stick, because this can turn into an argument that decays very rapidly into something that is rather unpleasant. And I have no personal opinions either way. I'm not a particularly religious person myself, but nevertheless, I cannot help but acknowledge that there is a certain aspect to spirituality that is poignant, to say the least. So with that, please don't feel offended if something in the videos get your ire, but it is unintentional, entirely unintentional. Next, there is a series of messages by Kobe Marsh Bossina, who I think I've made a bit of a fan. They also say that I mention indeed many times, to which I can only say, indeed. Next we have Ramon saying that if you catch a mermaid, she brings you gold from the sea. Lots of gold and diamonds, which is quite interesting. I had no idea that you could do that. I was under the impression that the entirety of what happened with mermaids was that you could marry them. I recall a story from when I was younger that I used to read to my brother called Fablehaven. And in the story, one of the characters actually, I think, married a naiad. And if I recall, a lot of the older fables as well have this idea that you can marry naiads, but I've never seen anything mentioned of them bringing gold or some kind of wealth. However, something at the back of my mind does tell me that that might have been a reward at some point, but I'm not entirely clear on the matter, so if anybody knows a little bit more about this, speak up. Next is Sebastian Silverfox, saying that they're surprised I never touched on the Mediterranean pelican myths, which are related to the phoenix. And I will say that there's a lot of information about a lot of these mythical creatures. It is very easy for my videos to spiral out of control into hour-long sessions, so I generally try to cut things down as much as possible. I will mention that in this case I was not familiar with the Mediterranean pelican, but either way, it is something that I would like to perhaps address in an addendum. In fact, that was the purpose of the mermaid addendum, that there was so much information in the mermaid video alone that I didn't really want to make it too bulky. My videos as they are already in excess, nearly double in excess of the average video length on YouTube, the average video length being about 5 minutes. And I will say that looking at the statistics of the videos, really talking shop now, that I do see a drop-off after about 4 or 5 minutes, which is not surprising considering the average watch rates in YouTube, but it's still a bit disheartening to make a long video and note that everybody's kinda not finishing it, especially since, in my opinion, the interesting part is right at the end. But so be it. So yeah, I'll add that to the Phoenix addendum stuff, and please look forward to that in some time in the future. I'm not entirely sure when. I don't have an ETA on any of my addendums in the future, but I do have the information written down, so don't you worry. Next I have Adith1111. I'm not entirely sure how to say your name, but they're quite complimentary on my werewolf video over here, saying that they really enjoy it, and they think that it's like a visual wiki page for mythological creatures. Actually, I do want to make it a bit more wiki-like, but presently I'm limiting everything to YouTube, which is not the most convenient way to get information. They also asked to see some more sci-fi and magical beings and whatnot in the videos. And I'd never actually considered doing any sci-fi stuff, so I certainly will consider adding that to the list of stuff that I can do. It does tie into something that I'm going to discuss a little bit later, which is specifically the, the Heroes videos that I was intending to do. But again, I will get to that a little bit later. Next is a comment by Tom Garcia saying, wait a moment, am I saying that aliens displaying UV light allergic characteristics, grey aliens are displaying UV light allergic characteristics. I'm reading this off of a piece of paper. Not the easiest thing to squint at this time of day. And I guess, at least in this case, the aliens are displaying UV light allergic characteristics. The typical grey alien ostensibly, I would imagine that the grey aliens are, a spacefaring race, and they hardly need much sunlight as a consequence. Their sunlight is entirely for powering their civilization, etc. And they're not exposed to any kind of terrestrial sunlight anymore. So they would naturally evolve to be less, how shall we say, photoresistant. A very interesting thought, and perhaps something I should consider if I want to do any sci-fi videos. So thank you so much for that, Tom Garcia. And next is Pokesaurus saying that, asking who else is born in the year of the dragon, and that there's a surprising amount of the simulacra in Pokemon, which is quite surprising. So I think that a lot of the year zodiac stuff, yes, that's what it is, not the year stuff, the zodiac stuff, the Chinese zodiac, is quite interesting. And it's something that I might want to consider if I ever branch this channel into a more spiritual kind of focus. But it is perhaps a source of information that I should add to my videos, especially since I realized that it was a missed opportunity in the case of the dragon. So thank you for the idea there, Pokesaurus. And obviously, because you're Pokesaurus, I imagine that you've got a lot of Pokemon on the brain, ergo the simulacra stuff. So long as you're enjoying it, you're very welcome, sir. Or ma'am, or whatever you might be, Pokemon. Next is Drisdom, saying that the videos are very fun and informative, but they're not entirely sure that I should start them on a black screen. Fortunately, this is something that, as I'm sure everybody might have noticed, it's something that I have stopped recently. But this is more to a general point that I want to make, which is that if there's any kind of aesthetic change or any kind of presentation change that you would like to see in the videos, please let me know. I want to try and improve the videos as much as possible. And indeed, the new opening came as a result of me getting kind of fed up with the general opening, as it were. That is my old opening, is what I mean. So yeah, I quite think that the new openings are a lot more attractive and are a lot more engaging. And I would really like to see anything else that you guys want to see changed, simply because it helps improve these videos and also it keeps you guys entertained. Obviously, it will be easier to do some things rather than others. For example, the openings that I'm making now, basically all I need to do is find a background for the icons to appear on, and then depending on the situation, either hire Richard Vidal to make an icon or generate them myself. Richard Vidal, incidentally, has been trying to help me with a lot of the art in these videos, so I should probably at some point post a link to his stuff, I guess. Yeah, I'll get round to that at some point. But for the most part, again, please let me know if you want to see any differences in the presentation. I know that these videos can seem a little bit slow at times, and I suspect that that's part of the reason that I'm seeing a drop-off at 5 minutes. But you never know. Let's see what happens. Next is another comment related to the mermaid by Ben Templar, asking, can they make women fall in love with them, with their music? And that's a very interesting question. Can a mermaid make a woman fall in love with them? I would suppose not. In a lot of the myth that I've seen about the mermaids, it's exclusively men who fall prey to the mermaid. And this might be related to the fact that traditionally, as we all know, women were not allowed on ships. So I don't know if there's any particular myth related to that. However, in a lot of fictions, such as Sinbad, etc., or, no, not even Sinbad, what was it? It was, Theseus. Yes, I'm sure it was Theseus. He went out and at some point had to deal with sirens, and I think there was a woman on his boat that helped him and his crew avoid that when coming back. Unfortunately, my memory's a bit rusty, and I was reading it for the potential hero video that I was going to do, but, oh no, it was Jason. Yes, it was Jason. Jason, at one point, like, after doing what he needed to do, he got the queen that he was supposed to earn, and on the way home, she helped them deal with the siren. So at least according to Greek myths, the sirens don't affect women. Now, we may want to ask, well, what if the woman in question is homosexual? I'm not entirely sure what would happen then. I would say probably in that case, yes, but it's much of a coin toss at that point. So for now, I think basically leave it up to your own opinion, and when I find more information about it, I will post it up on here somewhere. I'll probably add it to a Cod-Past. Until then, I would say that let's consider it to be an effect of magic. That the magic only works on men and stuff like that. Nothing else. With that said, however, again, these things are mythical creatures, so you can basically interpret it how you want to. Another compliment by Cretinous Jester. Sorry, my tongue is still tripping over itself today. Saying that they think that the Beastiary videos are better than the D&D manual, which I say thank you very much. I think that the D&D manuals are very well done, so this is a very big compliment to me, so thank you. I will say that if you would like to see a bit more D&D creatures, I should say, I could certainly cover those topics. However, D&D creatures are covered on YouTube, so I would have to be a little bit more discerning than usual when choosing what to talk about. And finally here, the Revolution says, the only real monsters in this world are human beings, in a point of the werewolf video. A very interesting perspective, obviously quite cynical, but one that we must nevertheless forget. We have what is known as the theory of mind. That is to say that we can imagine that other creatures have a mind. And moreover, we can also understand how we are vulnerable and then how other human beings are vulnerable and generally how other creatures are vulnerable. Where most animals learn by instinct and through play how to kill one another, we can quite easily imagine how to bring about unpleasant situations for other animals and ourselves, which makes us, I guess, the only creature on Earth capable of evil, but it really depends on how you define evil, and then consequently monsters. I suppose it adds more to the philosophical bent in these videos, which, at least with the advent of the Krampus video, is something that I've been wanting to explore a bit more, but whether I can follow through on that is a different story. A lot of the philosophy training that I did in university has unfortunately leaked out of my ear. So, for what it's worth, I will try and refresh my memory on all of this stuff, but I don't know how much of it might apply to these things. On that note, though, in the most recent live stream that I did, we did go on a bit of a tangent about The Witcher. And an interesting point in that, I suppose I'll say book series, because in the video game series it's not particularly addressed, but an interesting point in that was that both of the swords that the Witcher possesses, because he is a monster hunter, are in fact meant for monsters. Now, in the video game series, they've sort of altered this a bit. They say that the one sword is for human beings, the steel sword is for human beings, and that the silver sword is for monsters. And this was rather poorly rendered in the video game, the first video game, where the main character kills a human being using the silver sword, and, the human being makes this whole point of saying, oh no, that sword's meant for monsters, blah, 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 and then the main character says, of course it's meant for monsters, and then just kills him. And what happened there is they kind of misinterpreted the situation with regards to the swords, because both swords, as I mentioned, are for monsters, just some monsters are weak to magic, others are not. Essentially, all of the monsters in that world are born from the actions of human beings, and they're more of a metaphor for how society is harmed by our own conduct, etc. So, make of that what you will. Anyway, moving on. The next comment that I have is from Tyson Scott, based on my tea ceremony video. Yay! I'm glad that they're getting some attention. They're saying that they want me to do a series on famous Greek gods and goddesses, which is not related to the tea ceremony, but yeah. As I mentioned, I will be talking about the hero stuff shortly, so do look forward to that. Yay. But again, if you guys have ideas that are outside of what I'm already creating, please do let me know. Next is another comment by Kirby March Barcena, who says that they really would want to be in a Japanese tea ceremony. And I will mention that I am quite keen on making a few more of these videos that are related to tea ceremonies. Apart from anything else, these things are quite easy to produce, and this is mostly because I'm not doing any major kind of cutting, but basically I want to do a bit more explaining of this because it's helping me understand and study for the tea ceremonies that I'm doing in real life. I have about in April my first proper, this coming April, that is to say, April 2018, my first proper tea ceremony where I'm conducting the tea ceremony, not in any major position, but still as a waiter. That's the best way that I could explain the word, as a waiter. And it's rather nerve-wracking having to remember everything that I need to do. So, yay. Again, if you guys would like to see any more of these videos, do let me know. I intend to go around just wherever strikes my fancy and make some tea ceremony videos wherever I happen to end up. The idea being that I will have created a tea ceremony on, well, basically every kind of surface in Japan that I can find. I had sort of planned to do it in the middle of Osaka at one point, but it's a little bit crowded, so yeah. And I may annoy some people. I've still got that in the back of my mind though, so maybe it'll happen. Another comment by Tyson Scott saying that they think that the closest representation of the phoenix, or where the myth's origin may lie, is in the transition between the seasons. Specifically that the fire is then autumn and the ashes are winter, etc., which is actually quite a beautiful idea. I had never thought of the phoenix in that way, and so I thank you so much, Tyson, for sharing this with us. Please, everybody, this is quite a nice comment, and I highly recommend that you take this into consideration when thinking about the phoenix myth in future. To be a representation of the changing season is quite nice. However, I will say that, at least insofar as the phoenix is an Arabic creature, I'm not familiar with the seasons down there, so I don't know if it is as stark as you would find, in Europe and North America and South America and Southern Africa, and to an extent Australia. But this is really the kind of comment that I love to see, so thank you so much for sharing this, Tyson. Next is a request from Jerome Alexandre. Sorry, I struggle with the name sometimes, asking me to do a video on Anabraxas. I must confess, I'm not entirely sure what an Abraxas is. I looked it up, and it seems to be some kind of archangel, or some kind of demon, or some kind of vague deity. But if anybody knows what an Abraxas is, do let me know. It sounds quite odd, and maybe it'll make for an interesting video. After that, we have a comment from Kerry White's Strange World, saying that they know that humans are not too big because our bodies don't allow for the major size with regards to the giant video, but they're certain that other creatures can become rather large. And this is in fact, quite a reasonable thing to say. Any of you who have watched my Behemoth videos or Leviathan videos know full well that it is reasonable for other animals, because their shape is different, to become very, very big. There is a limit to this. We do have to consider how an animal might get large enough to, how should I say, how the kind of limits that an animal would have placed upon its body if it became too large. I think that Kerry White, or perhaps someone else, later mentioned in a Behemoth video that it is not unreasonable for a creature to become the size of a planet. To which I say, not really, because that is a lot of mass, and imagine trying to pump blood through something like that. Now, obviously, the creature would have to be completely different from what we can conceive of, at least, as creatures are in the world today. They would probably not rely on blood or something along those lines. Or if they do, they might have multiple hearts, and they would certainly need an inordinate amount of stomachs, because trying to transfer nutrients across a volume that great would be nigh impossible with a circulatory system that we use. So there are limits, at least insofar as what our biology allows on the size of creatures. But we must also remember that not everything that we understand as being biologically similar to us is necessarily life. I think there was an example of that in the Half-Life video game series, where one of the side documents mentioned that the scientists in that series were looking at a planet, and the weather patterns on the planet resembled thought. It looked like the planet was thinking. So ostensibly then the planet is alive and doing its own thing, but not necessarily a form of life that we would recognize. Sorry, I kind of botched this up, and I've only got really one take for this Cod-Past, so I hope that makes sense. If anybody would like to clarify what I'm saying, or add to what I'm saying, or ask me to clarify, or just engage me further on this, do let me know, especially yourself, Mr. or Mrs. Kerry White. Sorry, I should say Strange World. It is quite an interesting topic as to what constitutes life, because, as we all know, viri are not alive, yet they reproduce and act upon our bodies in rather horrific ways. Next is another comment by Kerry White Strange World, saying that our science has yet to have anything transform in a rapid way in which the werewolf transforms. Obviously, this being a comment on the werewolf video. Kerry White then suggests that erectile tissue could be used to create rapid transformation. I did comment to Kerry White that there are limitations in how fast something can transform its body. There is a maximum limit to how much fat can be used in a single day. There's also a maximum limit to how easily your body can transfer nutrients and gain nutrients. For example, if we consider that, well, let's say you want to grow a whole new arm. To get the amount of calcium required for the bones alone would be kind of a long process. You would have to eat a lot of calcium. Remember, your body only takes in so much calcium in one go. Moreover, these things require the development of muscles, tendons, nerves, etc., and this is not a fast process, especially since in these cases we're trying to transfer a lot of energy in a very delicate way. The majority of the time, things that grow very quickly grow cancerous, like, for example, cancers. Hair is also something that grows rather quickly, but it is also quite a simple structure. If we're talking about finer structures, then that's a bit more difficult to render. Though on the note of erectile tissue, they specifically refer to the male reproductive organ as an example of this, to which I also mentioned that you would need a lot of control of blood pressure. The way the organ itself functions is that it basically traps blood in the vicinity, and then this causes the organ to expand. Now, whilst you could have this kind of structure all over the body to alter the shape, it's, I think, a little bit unreasonable to have it rely on blood, simply because, well, I imagine this would put a lot of strain on the heart. However, you could use some kind of fluid like cell tissue or maybe even water just to create the same effect, but it will mean that the tissue itself is vulnerable to puncture, so don't forget that. Otherwise, it is a very interesting idea, and I highly encourage people to engage in my videos with this kind of thinking. It is very interesting and very, very fun. I really enjoyed Kerry's comment. Next, a comment by Ken Wesser, saying if we can't capture it, then how do we know what the properties of the phoenix feathers are? Which is a very, very good question. They also mentioned the phoenix tears. How do we know what the phoenix tears do? As for the feathers, I could probably say, feathers fall off birds, but the tears are a bit more difficult to imagine. I'm not sure that birds actually cry in a way that we may consider crying, so really it might actually be phoenix poop that the people are talking about. That could be a thing. But, yeah. While phoenixes would certainly have lacrimal glands and, wet their eyes, I don't imagine they cry. But again, a very good point by Ken Wesser. How do we know these things about the phoenix if we can't catch it? Next is a comment by Harith Sith. Noob Skyrim player attacking a giant at level 3. Well, I'll have you know, sir, that if you paid a little bit more attention, it was on God mode. But yeah, no, that was quite newbie. The entire clip of the Skyrim video giant thing, which was obviously for the giant video, was to just literally get footage of a giant. There was nothing more to it, but you have a sharp eye paying attention to the level. And again, as I said, it was on God mode, so the character wouldn't have died. Rex Rivers, the individual who collects the video game footage for me, was kind enough to consider that. I thought it would have been a bit humorous to see somebody getting whacked up into the sky. I do like to put some humorous visual material in my videos. I don't know if anybody catches in on them, but that is something that I was hoping for. However, as it stands, the God mode thing I thought was quite fun as well. simply because it was a level 3 character fighting a giant. So, again, good eyes. Kata says, I have only one question. Is the name Moon Chicken in any way related to Balanced Druid? Before making this recording, I didn't know what Balanced Druids were. Apparently they're part of some kind of World of Warcraft thing, as Kata has enlightened me. Although I did play World of Warcraft, I didn't play it long enough to know what a Balanced Druid was. As for the name, no. The name does not come from the World of Warcraft stuff. It is a nickname that I gave to my dog, and then sort of turned into this. That's why the silhouette against the moon is not a chicken, but a dog. The individual with whom I was working prior to this time, a gentleman by the name of Christopher, insisted that we actually have the silhouette of a chicken against a moon, misinterpreting the origin of the name. However, since his departure, I have altered the silhouette to that of a long-haired dachshund. That is the kind of dog that I have, so yay. And there's the origin of the moon chicken. Cynthia Hammer says, perhaps the hunt is symbolic of conquering of feminine divinity, at least in relation to the unicorn video. This comment is, I should mention. Wow, that was a terribly messed up sentence. This comment is related to the unicorn video. Cynthia Hammer says that perhaps the hunt is symbolic of the conquering of feminine divinity. A very interesting thought. It reminds me of something that Robert Anton Wilson would say, or one of those writers, and it is not something that I had thought of before. I would need an explanation as to what feminine divinity is, and how precisely it was conquered, or metaphorically or literally. But it is a topic that might be worthy of discussion. Some of these more abstract things I think I should make into a live stream, a topic of a live stream, which does give me a few ideas. I'll see what I can come up with, but if anybody would be interested in joining me, let me know. Next is a pair of comments from Schizoid Boy. The first comment mentions werewolves and how they were actually able to transform into multiple things. This is something that I do mention in the werewolf video, that basically any witch or warlock could transform into the animal of whatever skin they had. So what I mean by that terrible sentence is that if they had the skin of some random animal, they could transform into that animal without any trouble. And this would mean that they could become a bear or a tiger or a leopard, etc. So a very interesting point there, and something we should all remember. I don't know if werewolves have, in a way that is not related to this magic, I don't know if they have transformed into other creatures, but it's not outside the realm of mythical possibility in that case. I mean, again, we are talking about fantastical things here, so anything is possible. But insofar as what the myth says, I'm sure that at some point this might still be lingering around out there somewhere. Next, Schizoid Boy mentions that it is not a very scientific thing to say that there are no such things, that there is no such thing as ghosts. I do take issue with this statement simply because the idea of the scientific theory, at least, is that we don't make any positive assumptions. We don't assume that something exists. We assume that it doesn't exist and then just prove ourselves wrong in that case. That's sort of the whole idea of positivism. If you really want to go into details about this, I highly recommend reading on Karl Popper and various scientific methods. But basically, I want to hammer this home that we kind of have to assume that nothing exists and then build up from there. It does get rather more complicated in the epistemological aspect of it all, but basically we can't make any positive claims like that. We can only make negative claims. I want to remind everyone that the scientific method is something that everyone can do. You know, you are a scientist. There's no such thing technically as a lab coat scientist. Everyone is a scientist. The lab coat scientists are actually researchers. You yourselves can employ the scientific method in your daily lives, and then, in so doing, become a scientist. That was the whole point of the scientific method. Just remember the rules of conducting it, is all I can say. Don't make any positive claims. Always test what you say. And then, if you do find you're wrong or whatever, you change your opinion. So, yeah. That isn't to say that ghosts may not exist, but it is something that, again, we cannot claim to exist. And I know it sounds a little bit aggressive of me to be addressing it so directly, but I do want to make it clear that there is a line between what is considered scientific and what is not. And that doesn't necessarily mean for everyone that science has to be the be-all and end-all of your decision-making skills, etc., but it is something that that has proven useful. So I won't tell you what to think, but I will tell you what at least I think. Next is another comment by Great Sayer Kirby saying, "Oh wow, a Beastiary video on the holidays, a Christmas miracle." Now, I will say that the text conversations that we do have tend to not have much of a tone about them. So I choose to interpret this as flippant sarcasm, sort of like biting sarcasm. Like, oh, you lazy bastard, you never do anything. I know that this is probably not what Great Sayer Kirby intended to communicate, but I find it more humorous if I interpret it that way. To which I can only say, yeah, I'm sorry. I really have been trying to make a bit more of an effort to get these videos out on time, but you know how it is, life and everything. In fact, the Krampus video was supposed to be out before Christmas, but again, life got in the way and obligations to real-world stuff consumed me. So yeah, I do hope that everybody enjoyed the video nevertheless. So you're absolutely welcome there. Finally, a comment by Sebastian Silverfox, saying that they find it worth noting that sauropods seem to match the description of behemoths. They mention that the dinosaurs could potentially, just in their features, be seen to be similar to what we understand to be the behemoth, that lifting out of the water of a river, the displacement of water, rather, I should say, by a sauropod could be seen to be drinking up an entire water when the sauropod does eventually lift itself out of the water. Sorry, terrible tongue today, as I mentioned before. Which is actually a very interesting idea. Were it not for the fact that I'm generally quite certain that human beings did not exist at the same time as dinosaurs, it is still a fun idea and something that I highly encourage everybody to consider. Please, these ideas that you guys leave for me and each other on these videos are, well, I find them to be quite entertaining and quite a lot of food for thought. Even though I might have a different opinion from yourselves, it is still something that is quite engaging and very, very fun. So please, please, please do leave those comments. I really appreciate it. And with that, oh my word, it has been a very long time. Without further ado, let's quickly get into the summary of things that I've done since the previous Cod-Past. Since then, I've made 2 Beastiary videos, the Giant and the Krampus. The Giant was actually a very fun video to make, and I think that I more or less got that one generally okay done. Done okay, I should say. I was a bit rushed towards the end, and it did show, especially with the opening scroll thing, the icon screen. The lighting was way too off balance for the icon to come out clearly, and so even in the thumbnail, if anybody looks at the thumbnail, it's really not a very good thumbnail. I'm rather not happy with it, but I do want it to match the ultimate opening sequence, so that's what I have to live with. However, it was a rather well-researched thing. I should mention that I forgot to include some details on the equations that I presented there, specifically the one related to arm length, and, well, muscle length, not arm length, muscle length related to bone length, and I should have probably explained that a little bit more. I guess what I could do is part of the stream that I mentioned earlier as discussing more abstract concepts related to these myths, I could include more detail on that in that stream when it does happen, because the more I sit here thinking about it, the more I actually want to do that, so yeah. Although I don't want to do it alone, so I'm going to try and find someone with whom I can speak. We'll see what happens, because staring at a microphone this whole time, talking to myself, is not the most interesting thing to do for 2.5 hours, as I discovered with the Harry Potter stream. Next was the Krampus video. The Krampus video was actually quite fun. Again, this one I was a bit rushed for, as I mentioned, and it wasn't entirely as well received as previous videos were received and whatnot, but I do hope that everyone enjoyed it. I wasn't all that happy with how quickly I produced it, and it kind of shows in the video. However, what I did do, which was quite different in this video, was instead of discussing how a creature might be real, I discussed the philosophy of the creature, which was actually quite fun. I couldn't go into a lot of detail, and originally my script was like I don't know, about 5 more pages longer than what you guys got to listen to, just with the idea of what is morality. I had included a lot of what I'd been doing on neurology lately, specifically, well, not neurology, sorry, neuroscience, and specifically with regards to brain development. I had tried to incorporate as much as I could about cybernetics and game theory in it as possible, but again, this turned into something that was very long, and I would not have had it done in time for its eventual release. And also, I ultimately realized that this is a topic for a completely separate series of ideas, so I'll try and find some way to put it in, but for now, I will have to leave it out. There's not all that much to say on these 2 videos other than things are now, at least for making the videos, running somewhat smoothly. I did have a big gap there where I wasn't producing anything, but again, life did get in the way, so my apologies. I didn't follow through on my original goals, my only personal set goal things, so hopefully I can do that now. Moreover, in that time I produced another tea ceremony video. That one was quite fun. The cutting was a lot better, I think, in this one, although I was not able to do everything 100% the first time, and you can see a lot of shadows of the equipment that I'm using. It was a bit annoying watching over that, but I thought, why not? Let's just throw it out there. I did mention earlier that I wanted to make a few more tea ceremony related videos, so hopefully that will come at some point in the future. Again, if you would like to see any particular location or any particular details not regarding or related regarding the tea ceremony videos, do let me know and I'll get right on it. Finally, the only other thing that I can think of mentioning is the streams. Yay, that was fun, but oh my word, that was very, very tiring. And obviously the Harry Potter stream got a little bit out of control. I should have kept it a bit more on topic, especially when I look back on it and saw that it was so long. I can't imagine that anybody actually sat through with all of that and listened to it. It has been brought to my attention that people don't particularly like very, very long videos, especially, of that kind of length. Although I know that there is a subset of people who watch YouTube videos for just the noise, those same people that I'm producing this Cod-Past for. Those people aren't necessarily in the majority and don't actually quite appreciate very long videos. Obviously, I'm not going to shorten my videos for that demographic, but it is something that I do want to consider your guys' time. Personally, when I'm watching YouTube videos, I like to have them running on in the background as I'm doing something else, and that's why I make them in this kind of format, mainly because I want to do it for myself. However, with that said, it is a bit disheartening to know that some people may not enjoy very, very long videos. I'm going to try and think of what content might work best for very long videos, but I'm not presently sure at this time what I could do. The first streamed video, was basically a reading of comments and sort of filled in for the Cod-Past kind of thing, but I don't consider it a Cod-Past simply because I wasn't discussing all of the topics of a Cod-Past there. And moreover, I don't think that it was a test, so it doesn't really count as a Cod-Past. Finally, the other thing that I wanted to mention was that streaming is a very good way to produce content, and it's a very good way for me to engage with you guys. This Cod-Past is perhaps not the best way to do that, but it does let me talk to people who would otherwise not show up for the streams. If you guys would like to see Cod-Past streams rather than Cod-Pasts, do let me know, because that is something that I could do a lot more easily, and I would appreciate it. It does mean that I might be a little bit lazy, because at least with this kind of video, I do have to edit it at some point and do something. Whereas with streams, any falling short of the mark is kind of automatically forgiven because it is a stream. Now, I don't want to fall into a bad habit of just accepting that. I see a lot of people on YouTube accepting it, and indeed, I accept it from them when they fall short of the mark on a stream. However, I do want to try and elevate myself to a higher level of presentation. So I have been fiddling around with OBS and I have been learning as much as possible. You guys have maybe been a bit annoyed recently to see the invite to a live stream at the start of every video, despite the fact that there was no live stream. That was me fiddling with a whole bunch of stuff and just not knowing what on earth I was doing. However, I think I fixed that at this point. Anyway, that was a very brief summary of what I had been doing up until now. As for going forward, I still have plans on making a video related to the Greek mythologies and all of that kind of thing, but unfortunately, finding the time for this is proving very difficult. I had done several iterations of it, but the main problem that I ran into was having to explain the story and then comment on it. It's not easy to do a short video in that way. What's more is that I had chosen a different format for it, where I would basically be a talking head on a camera, in front of my camera, because that is a lot easier to produce than most other types of content. Alas, it went on longer than what I could bear, and I kind of wanted to meet the 5-minute presentation mark, which it just wasn't coming together. So I may have to accept that I will have to make these videos a little bit longer before launching them. Unfortunately, they have fallen a bit at the wayside with work and everything lately, but I will get around to doing them eventually. So don't worry, they are still coming. But if anybody can think of any way that I can produce this stuff easily and quickly, do let me know. The speed is very important because, there's only so many hours in the day, and I've often found myself sitting awake at night lamenting that the sun had slipped off the edge of the world once more. However, with regards to other stuff, I also want to do more live streams in general. I want to include some of the people who have been commenting on here more consistently than others, simply because I feel that you guys have quite a lot of interesting things to say. I have been discussing vaguely with one of the other YouTubers on here that maybe we should do something together, but I'm not entirely sure what to do exactly. I have been tossing around a few ideas, but trying to justify why I would be talking to another person at the same time has been proving quite difficult. So I'll try and see what I can manage, but again, if there's anything else you would like to see, do let me know. In fact, that should probably be the theme for this entire Cod-Past. Let me know what you want to see. Finally, I should also mention just before closing off, because this has gone on for far too long, and it occurs to me that I should be taking a bit more of advantage of the fact that I'm in the middle of rural Japan. Although I'm not a vlogger as such, I do think that perhaps you guys could get some enjoyment out of some of the stuff that I'm making, so do let me know if there's anything that you'd like to see from where I am abouts here. One of the individuals that I was speaking to earlier wanted to see some of the shrines in the area after I offered the shrine showing things. So again, if Japan interests you, let me know. It would have probably been better were I still back home in South Africa, but because Africa is interesting and whatnot. But here I am in glorious Daybook Empire. Okay, actually it's True Sun Empire, because that's how you're supposed to read Nihon, but I like to tease the people that I hang out with and say that it's the Daybook Empire. One individual actually said that they get a library card, and I thought that that was amazing because they completely missed the joke and then just added to it, but this is kind of off topic. So yeah, with that, that's the aim for the future, and I don't want to make my time here, outstay my welcome. So thank you for listening to another Cod-Past. Don't forget I have a Patreon. I don't want to shill it because, it's just there to create incentive for me to do more work, but I have been told that I should be advertising it more, although I'm terrible about doing that. So, yeah, I hope to see you guys in future. Please enjoy more videos. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you want. And speak to you later. Cheerio.